Good morning, everyone. We are in Mishna Bikurim, Perek Gimel, Chapter 3, Mishna 1, Mishna Aleph, Mishna 1. I dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas Rav Yaakov Eliezer. Ketzad Ma'afrishin Bikurim. How do we go about designating or separating the fruits for Bikurim? Yored Adam Mesech Sodeo. A person goes down into his field, Roya Te'ena Shabikra, and he finds a fig that has bikra, that has begun to ripen. It's not fully ripened, it's begun to ripen. Eshkol Shabikar, or a cluster of grapes that is ripening. Rimain Shabikar, a pomegranate that is beginning to ripen. Koishrai Bigemi, he ties it with a reed, with a soft reed, what we would call tying a string around it. He declares, these are bikurim. That's what it takes to separate, to designate bikurim. And this is the best way of doing it. Meaning, if let's say you didn't do it at this earlier stage, you could do it at a later stage. But the point here is that the way it should be done is that as soon as you see that you have your, fruit that has begun to ripen, you designate it as bikurim. Now, tying the reed around it, the purpose of tying the reed around it is to remember that you designated these as bikurim, because it's not coming off yet. It still has to grow more. Things have to grow still, and then you have to pick it. So the reed is there to remember which ones you designated. But what the Mishnah is really importantly showing us is that bikurim can be designated while it's still attached to the ground. Unlike truma, that you cannot designate anything as truma while it's still attached to the ground, bikurim can be designated when it's attached to the ground. So by the time it comes to the point that it's fully grown and detached, it is already bikurim, and there's no need to have to designate it or declare it as bikurim again. Rabbi Shimon says, even so, he should again declare them as bikurim once they have become detached from the ground. Rabbi Shimon basically holds that it doesn't help to designate bikurim while still attached to the ground, and therefore, you could have tied your reed, and you may decide later on that this is going to be your bikurim. But you cannot rely on a declaration that you made while it was still attached to the ground. Once it's attached to the ground, you have to declare it again and designate it again as bikurim for it to be your bikurim. Bartanura speaks out, the halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, but that of the Tanna Kama, that bikurim can be designated even while the fruit is attached to the ground. We now continue with the laws of Rechilas from the Chavetz Chaim, Klal Test Chapter 9. We are in Sif Yudal in paragraph 14. If something bad happened to Reuven was damaged by someone. He doesn't know that whatever this mishap that happened, doesn't know who did it. Somebody had to do it, doesn't know who did it. So Reuben comes. Oops, I did this yesterday. Pardon me. Sorry about that. Sorry. We have to do Sif Tesvav 15. New case. Now the Chavetz Chaim says I'm going to discuss a situation that many people commit rechilas in doing. I'll give you an example, he says, and from it you can compare it to other situations. It is very common. Limkar, a person comes, brings merchandise to a city to sell, and many buyers come to him. Meaning, there's a market, he brings merchandise to the market, and people buy. It is very common that someone who doesn't have any money on him, who bayres sechira, he chooses whatever the merchandise that he wants. He asks the seller not to put it away, not to sell it to send anyone else. He's going to go home and bring money. In the meanwhile, other buyers come, and they pressure the seller to sell them that which you put aside for this other person. And it's wraps them, and he agrees, and he gives in. The first guy comes back, asks for the merchandise that he has to be put away. And what does the seller say? Mashiva responds, so-and-so came, says the guy's name, identifies who he is. He came, and I did not want to give it to him. He threw the money at me, and he took the merchandise. At the end, I was forced to give in because I didn't want to fight with him. So basically, what did he do? He identified, he put the blame on a person, on a specific person. Doing that is 100% rechilas. You're basically telling how someone else harmed him. Although it was very wrong on the part of that purchaser to pressure the seller to give him something that someone else chose and was put aside for him. At the end of the day, he sold it to him. He accepted the money. At the end of the day, it's a sale. There's no way, there's nothing you can do anymore, that there should be some kind of constructive purpose for the person by revealing who the person was who took his merchandise. All you're going to do is bring animosity on this person, bring animosity to the heart of the original chooser on this person who took his merchandise. And this constitutes 100% rechilas. Now, all the more so when something very common happens. The second guy didn't even put on that much pressure. And it could very well be that the seller didn't even tell him that he made it with someone else to buy this. But he realized that the seller realizes that he's gonna have some kind of benefit by selling to this guy. And so that the first person shouldn't have complaints on the seller to say you're not truthful. So what does he do? He shifts the blame from himself, puts it on someone else. But he's lying. It's not true. This is even a worse sin because he falls into what's called a Meiser Shemra, spreading a false rumor, spreading a false piece of news. And everything mentioned before that comes about, all the other sins a person commits when doing so, as mentioned before, applies here. So you have the situation where it could very well be that the first person did pressure and did put on a lot of pressure. Excuse me. And did put on a lot of pressure on the seller. But what does the seller do? He still blames it on this person. Then it's even worse when he basically puts the blame on another person when he wanted to sell it to him, and the other person didn't even know any better. Whatever the case is, one has to be very careful not to reveal the name of the second buyer, the person who actually bought it. Even if, let's say, the seller takes the blame, the Lemon says, it was my mistake. He didn't know that we made up before. Meaning, he identifies the person who bought it, puts the blame on him, puts the blame on himself. So-and-so bought it, he didn't know. I didn't tell him. It's my fault. I didn't tell him that I already had made up to sell it to you. Okay, so he's not blaming that person, but he he basically pointed out the person who bought it. Because even in this case, the original purchase, the one who wanted to purchase it, will now he will now come to dislike that other person, that person who bought it. Because at the end of the day, he looks at that person as the person who took away his thing, who maybe even ruined his livelihood. The seller should just reply, I made it was my mistake. I mistakenly sold it to someone else. Whatever it is, it can very well be that it was his mistake. He forgot that he had made it with that person. At the end of the day, don't mention the other buyer, because even if the seller takes all the blame, at the end of the day, if you point out who the buyer is, the original person who wanted to buy is going to feel animosity towards that person for actually taking what he wanted. And therefore, all that should be done is for the seller to take responsibility without mentioning who the other person was who bought it. Have a wonderful day.